welcome you all to the final of the Clare Stewart Memorial Trinity IV 2012, which is now, and record-setting, the largest IB to have ever been held in Ireland. Yeah. So before that, I'd like to introduce you our panel tonight. In the chair, we have Mr. Hugh Burns, Euros winner and a Worlds finalist. Oxford Women's winner and Euro semi-finalist. Also Cara Contucci, a Euros final judge and BBC News talking head. We also have Ian Schnee-Kern, winner of the Cork IB and finalist of the Kingsmill Moor. Winner of DCU Open and the Cork Invitational. Mr. Jonathan Wise, Euro semi-finalist and convener of this absolute nightmare a few years ago. And Mr. Les Williams, who is a Worlds and Euros breaking judge. Tonight are his first proposition, Ellen H. Shea, Miss Muireann Dwyer and Miss Ruth Varles. His first opposition, and equally likely to draw such a big cheer, is Ellen H. Shea, Miss Christine Simpson. Edinburgh, the team of Miss Marlena, Varles. Of England's second national anthem. The motion before the House is this House welcomes the fall of global capitalism. These are false consciousness that we've been sold into, right? Because we believe that things like one man, one vote matters. We believe in these principles. We believe that we died for them in the past. We believe that we should fight for them now. It's
We are good people perverted by money. We have absolutely no idea what it is to, we've lost all sight of our humanity because we say people are equal, but we measure them. We have developed a concept of ownership that we extend to people because we measure how much you can rent them out for based on an hour, irrespective of which job. But we sell ourselves lies that allow us to live in that false consciousness. We sell ourselves lies it's awful that prostitutes have to whore out their bodies. But it's totally fine that men down mine shafts do it, right? It's totally fine that we've created an underclass that can never not be an underclass, because that's the issue with capitalism. Capitalism can never not have a system in which there are people on the bottom, right? Capitalism, because it creates a system in which everyone, the measure of success is defined by profit. The measure of success is dictated by how much money you have. And the problem with that is it's a self-perpetuating cycle. Everything, even the things that are supposed to make us free, like politics, like our voting and stuff like that, is controlled by money. Look at the American system. Genuinely, look at the fact that the 1% control everything. Look at the fact that people have been sold the American dream that just doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen. This idea that we've told people that, you can do it. Obama, the greatest lie, we can do it, that Obama sold everyone, is just that, ladies and gentlemen, a lie. But it's created this perception where we're all worried about the day in which we're going to be rich. Toby was right about that, ladies and gentlemen. And we need to, the only way in which we break that is to break the entire system, because we can never have something beneficial happening within the system. The reason we think any system will be better is because our instincts are good, right? The problem is that at the minute we are cogs in the machine and we can't even express those instincts because we are working for money all the time. We are told that in order to be a good person, you should work your ass off so that your kids can have a better future. You should work for someone else continuously, because the only way in which we can see that your kids will be okay is if you have lots and lots of money. We have a system, ladies and gentlemen, where we genuinely have kids who can't afford to get their lunch. We have kids who can't afford to go on a school trip. We have all of these things that we tell ourselves that it's okay because we're all free. We're not. Money is the most single oppressive thing. And let's look at why we formed capitalism. We formed it out of a goodness. We formed it out of an idea that we objected to political tyranny. We simply replaced one tyranny, ladies and gentlemen, with another. We replaced it with a tyranny that is taps into not only your psychology because it lets you think you're free, but also impacts on you physically, so that you are actively have to work all of the time in order to survive. No, thank you. The reason why any system will be better is our instincts are good. We have the numbers now, but also we have once capitalism goes, we'll have had that sharp shock that we know we don't want to go back there. We will have an institutional memory of what happened when we were the underclass. We won't want to do that to ourselves again. But also because of the fact that we genuinely all subscribe to things like equality, we do all hold a majority of individuals who live within capitalist societies will espouse those beliefs themselves. They just don't know that they're operating in a system which they like to run counter to that by opting into the capitalist system. Christine.
Okay, do we organise ourselves under a state that gives us things like basic provisions, or do we return absolutely to a state of nature?
It doesn't really matter. Genuinely, it doesn't matter. Because in either construct, we opt into it ourselves. In either one, by getting that shock, we will make a conscientious choice ourselves. So whatever we choose is legitimate because we've chosen it ourselves. We think it is more likely that we are going to choose things that a postmodern version of communism, because we have grown up in the capitalist system and we will be there are certain values that we hold, but they're also that we won't want to perpetuate that same norm again. There is a reason, for example, capitalism has created selfishness that we don't think is an inherent human quality. That's what they're claiming, and using the threat of return to state of nature, they're saying we're inherently selfish. But let's look at anti-capitalist systems. Let's compare tax dodging in the US, where Mitt Romney pays 13%, versus Sweden, where taxes are in the 40%, but no one dodges taxes because they've adopted a value system that we think is inherently human, that we think that capitalism at the moment is destroying. Okay, so let's see why feminism has failed us, ladies and gentlemen. Because feminism has told us a lie that we can change things within the capitalist system. Feminism and things of that ilk have allowed us to believe that we can have a revolution within the structure that has been decided by rich old white men, right? Destruction is the only way that we get to that new world order. And let's look at this, right? Within the capitalist system, where we hear things we will have better healthcare and better education, all this stuff, right? Cancer detection rates for, say, female cancers are much lower than cancer detection rates for male cancers. Whereas if you compare, in Cuba, for example, they have the highest instance of cures for breast cancer in the world, even though they don't have the facility, because they view people as equal when they've opted out of a capitalist mind frame, which everything is dictated by money, ladies and gentlemen. We think that kind of thing will happen in this system. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to look at the other forms of counterculture, why they can never work for us. Because inherently, they're reactionary. They're defined as a result of capitalism, and they filter in perversive ways, right? Why do women in Asia put whitening cream on their faces, ladies and gentlemen? Why do they get their eyes changed? It's because it is profitable for men or for people within the West to tell them that that's what they should do in order to be beautiful. Like, it is that pervasive that we don't even know what we find attractive, ladies and gentlemen. On a base core level, it's like something that you feel inside you is being dictated to you by someone else. Like, even let's look at countercultures like gay and lesbian cultures, right? Even those women who rejected male stereotypes of having to wear heels and makeup and stuff still prefer partners who do that predominantly. That is because we have no choice in the capitalist system at the minute. We have absolutely no idea what it is to be free. We have to break from it. Anything is better. Please propose. Thank you.
Now the call on Christine Simpson to open the case for the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, anything is better. Anything is better than having relative difference between men and women in their rates of cancer detection. Sometimes it's good to have cancer detected, or to have a health system, or to have some education, or to have enough food to go around because someone is incentivized to provide it. But sure, anything is better. I guess we can op it or create a model, I suppose, and prop then, whether it is either a state of nature or a return to absolute state control. I'll talk about both, and then I'll talk about why it might be nice to have stuff. Not even in a vacuous sense, but just in a basic sense of it allowing us to get on with the more meaningful things in our lives, as opposed to fighting each other with big sticks. Okay. Ruth tells us that capitalism defines everything we know, and that we aren't inherently selfish, and they've made us selfish. And I know that's appealing to think that we're all intrinsically good. But why in the hell would we let everyone walk all over us all of the time when they reconstruct our system to something that is not capitalism? It makes sense to try and preserve ourselves because we are what comes into the world and we are all that we have to defend necessarily. When we build systems where we tell each other we're all equal, at least we have some sort of chance. That's what they tell us we should be working on. We're not sure how it would work. We're not sure why it would work. We're not sure why people in Asia would stop changing their eyes, except that we wouldn't have anything that happens. Okay, next. How will we organise? Because they tell us you can't sell your body, you can't rent it out and tell yourself you're free. The problem is that someone has to in order to have anything. If that means an equal society such as under socialism or capitalism, you still have to force people to sell their body in order to make production for everyone else within that society. You still have to make them do things that they might not choose to do if they were in an ideal world, or they would have nothing and they wouldn't be in an ideal world. Okay. What we aren't defending is unfettered capitalism. What we aren't defending is standing over the fact that people have to absolutely be screwed over. But we can have provisions of basic minimums and still work in a global capitalist system, because that's what we do at the moment, and it is still capitalism. We understand that people will be left behind. But they say it like it's negative. What they forget is the other half of the sentence, which means humans can also achieve and differentiate themselves from the shades of grey that they would prefer we live in, unless someone feel left behind.
The mechanised world we live in now means huge amounts is being produced. That will exist even if you don't have a global capitalist system, because you still have those machines. The question is, why should we have food rather than lots of luxury goods and Xboxes?
Okay, hang on. We have the machines, but we don't want people to be slaves to those machines or ever work behind those machines. That means those machines won't be put to work, because no one can profit from it, because we don't want a system of money that differentiates one person from another. Capitalism is freedom. Simply, that is because money is a store of choice. You are entitled to decide how much you rent your body out. You're entitled to decide what use you put those things to. Yes, we're all living in a false consciousness. We don't believe it. Okay, even the poor have choice and control over their lives because they can still choose the products that are available to them. The differences, the higher quality of products, the fact that products exist, the fact that enough food exists. What happens when we return if we are doing a more organised thing such as communism? There's not enough to go around. People queue on the streets because there's no signalling effect as to what people might want. There's no one to produce those things because no one is incentivized to do so because you get nothing out of it. They tell you humans are so kind that they will always do it, always for everyone. Why? Why isn't that a false consciousness too? Why, before we created society, did we not act kindly and generously? Because we're not necessarily kind and generous people. We want to survive, we want those around us to survive because that's how we're built. And at the moment we do that while helping everyone else too, because that means we live in a society where we are protected from basic infringements. Human desire to succeed. Capitalism, which starts with basic provisions for everyone, means that people can choose their fields. Not ultimately, but to an extent. Basically, they want every labour, should people choose to undertake in it, whether or not they would, we're not sure. They expect that all the jobs will be filled and people will still get the basics that Arish tells you. There's no way to do that except through coercion. And once that coercion from a huge state structure exists, you don't get the freedom that Ruth tells you about because you have to be dictated by the patriarchy or by norms or by a higher structure. They tell you that it could be anyone, it could be filled with anyone. But if you return to an even more basic state, strength wins and words don't win anymore, and the strongest people can still rise to the top, and that tends not to be puny women, it tends to be more buff men. That doesn't work. The problem within their case is that you can't ever have anyone succeed because it leaves people behind. But the successes we get are so much better. Those are basic things. For example, having healthcare systems which provide for people. When private evil corporations still work towards cures for cancer and work towards unglamorous things like cures for diarrhea, they don't do it because they love humanity. They do it because they can make a profit, and the fact that they can benefit means they share those massive benefits, even unintentionally, with the rest of the world, and we still do better. Risk-taking means reward. They tell you, you can be happy because the farm machinery will still work, but we don't need yachts. We say you cannot guarantee that there'll be that distinction. You just mean you don't get anything. The progress we've seen, for example, directly through investments just happening because people can profit, means that we can actually decide between goods. We can decide meaningfully as opposed to just getting state handouts in long queues. Those sorts of things simply don't help. They tell you that we'll have just enough to get by, and then we'll get back to working on what people really want and how free we really can be. The point is that we waste everything we have, we continue to do nothing with ourselves, and we continue to wait around and hope that another system won't emerge. Systems can continue to emerge. All that happens is that someone comes back and tries to regain a power of a sort. They tell you it might be under a new structure, which is all-inclusive. They don't tell you what it will be, why it will be that way, or why no one has figured it out, except that hopefully we've all been lied to. We continue to act the way we do and to rise to the top because that's what we are put here for, to try to look different from the rest of humanity, to help those around us, to benefit ourselves, and as a result we help society sometimes. When we fetter the worst bits of ourselves that would exist in a state of nature, when we hold back from things like violence because of the self-benefits we get from that and from buying into those sorts of systems, we make ourselves more free because freedom isn't just about restraint from capitalism or restraint from state control. It's about being able to do something with your life except just defend that life. And if that means going out and buying stuff, or if that means making sure that the world around you happens to be better through having better food, better medical advancements, better technology, a better society that cares for people even when it's only for self-interested reasons, we think that that can still help us. The society that they envisage doesn't exist, can't exist, and they can't tell us what it would look like because it would forget what humanity looks like. It would forget that we might care about ourselves more, or that we might have to find a way to order ourselves because that benefits us. It benefits yourself and your family when you can succeed over other people, and that's how people want to structure their lives. I understand it's not the most palatable view, but at the moment we restrain it. We restrain it so that everyone can have something and that others can still get that meaning while not leaving everyone behind. They have to leave people behind. They will leave people behind. And suggesting that anything is better simply doesn't match up to the reality that we've known to be true, so we oppose.
Miss Muireann.
Ladies and gentlemen of these joint houses, if stuff is so amazing, why is it okay that most of the world has none? Capitalism doesn't exist. We don't give basic goods to everyone. We don't give availability and choice to everyone. is out to us for our model not existing. Hers is a fiction completely. Why is it okay that we can welcome something when we don't know what's going to happen next? First of all, we're proposing a value system, and I'm also going to talk to you about how just the destruction of a system makes what follows better. That'll be a bit more practical if they'll enjoy that. Choice. Why does it matter? We all can only know our own existence. We can't know anyone else's for certain. All we can know is that we have an experience within this world. Therefore, if we want to value anything, it has to be our own experience and our own existence. That means that we have to value what we do with our lives and how we choose that. Why does that become completely devalued when the moment I come into existence, it has been marked out pretty much on the chalkboard of mass financial capitalism that has decided what I will buy and what I will contribute because it's most efficient to those leeching off at the top because they got there by an accident of birth. We think that if choice matters, you cannot exist under a capitalist system. Why are we good people? We are good people because in the moments, like for example, when there's a fire, you try to help other people. A profit motive didn't create that. That was a comment, like that was humanity and that was empathy, right? We think that we are good further because the state of nature, Christine, it was an explanatory device. We weren't all just running around killing people. We did develop. Like we admit that capitalism itself developed out of a good instinct. We think we do have those good instincts. They were just perverted by the capitalist system. Why does capitalism pervert it always? Because capitalism requires a delineation of our humanity and of us within that humanity. Because by definition, you have to have at least two separate groups, i.e. the holders of capital and the holders who don't have it. That's the definition of it, right? Why is that bad? Because one of those groups is inherently more powerful within that system and therefore they get to dictate. So read back to what I said about choice and we're done, right? We think that profit, first of all, exploits the work of others. It exploits their contribution and benefits someone else who doesn't deserve it. We think that's inherently unfair and demeaning to your contribution. Secondly, we think that it creates these incentives, right? They think these incentives are great because they make things run, right? They're not incentives. They're chains. They're chains that make you a cog to a machine that you never consented to and you never opted into, right? We think, can we ever produce things without the profit motive? Of course we can! There are so many reasons why we can. First of all, we think that it's the same drive that led us to come out of the cave and led us to create democracy and create capitalism even in that instance was a drive towards betterness. We think even at a more fundamental level, even operating within this paradigm, we think people have pride in things and people contribute for each other. But the same analysis that Christine gave you, that we want to strive and be better, that's not because we want to get rich all the time. There's something more core to that that's just being exploited by the idea of tying how rich you are to that instinct towards pride, right? That's where it gets corrupted. Because you do want to be good. You want to make something of your life. The problem is you've been told that the only way to do that is to get a massive bank account. That's where the incentive gets perverted, but it still exists within all of us, right? Also, we think that what we create, we create a value system of egalitarianism, because that's, capitalism is inherently divisive of our humanity, like I told you, and that's the value structure that leads to the corruption of it and leads to exploitation within it. I'll take you at the end of this. If we can create a system, and we say at the very beginning that this is built entirely on a belief on the individual and on the beauty and dignity of that individual. We're all beautiful, thanks Liam. We think that is when you create a value system that you build from, you can actually build something better. We don't want to predict the future. We could stand up here and say, is capitalism going to survive in 2 years' time? Prove it. We think that you have a value system versus a value system, and that's what we're debating. Go.
Why do all concepts of relativity and striving to be better than those relative to others around you disappear when you change the incentive structure in terms of payment?
They don't, that's the point. You still get creativity, you still get production, but it's based on your perception of it and your experience of it, and it's not being exploited by someone who's trying to drive demand by telling you that this look is in now, or that you need a bigger car, or you need 2 cars if you're going to be properly middle class. Of course it exists, you're right, yes, we're all right, yeah, great. Further, we think it's just the very nature of why we specifically just welcome the destruction of capitalism. Because what happens when a system falls, right? It proves that a system can fall. What does that mean? It means that we have the ability then to hold the next system to account in a way that we never could before. If you can crush one, you can crush another. If they deviate from the value system that we set up, we're going to smash it again and make a new one, right? But why is capitalism just so disgusting? Because Christine got up here and told us why it's lovely for us. It's lovely for us in this room. It's It's lovely for us in this part of the world. But like, the basic things that she's trying to defend just don't exist for like 80% of the world. Like the fact that there are children dying of hunger all the time and we don't do anything because we're never allowed to think about it even. We're never allowed to opt out of it. Like the fact that we don't produce drugs that help these people because it's not profitable is just disgusting, right? We think that that is the very nature of it. But we also think that there's always going to be people who become dehumanized and degraded and oppressed by it. If you are born into poverty and every day you see people who have been graded by the world and by society as being better than you, that teaches you something disgusting. That teaches you that you are lesser than, and that limits your ability to ever exit out of that. Ruth tells you about the child who can't go on the school trip and lies to his friends about it for the reason because he can't afford it, but he says it's because he was sick. Because he has been degraded by a system that doesn't value what's intrinsic to us, it just values some digits in a bank account or some pieces of paper, right? That is disgusting if we believe that we are worth anything. We don't like stuff, we like us, and we think that that's what we get under this. We think if you look at any analysis of groups that have been marginalised, the tool of oppression is always the capitalist system. How do we keep women in line? We made them financially dependent on their husbands, so they couldn't leave, right? We made them dependent on them for protection in the financial sphere like they had been in the physical sphere, right? That's how you keep people down. Because how can you ever decide what you want if you always have the fear of just starving in the street? How can you ever make a choice for your own life system if you're always worried about how it's going to look on your CV? We think people should be allowed to exist and they deserve to exist if anything matters at all. If we matter at all, we have to welcome the destruction of this system. It's going to be fantastic. Come with us.
Haughton to continue the case for LNHA.
Ladies and gentlemen, at its heart, this is a debate about happiness and the pathways through which we achieve happiness. We think that capitalism is a system by which we give everybody meaning in their lives, no matter what it is that their jobs are. We think that any alternative is a system either where people have no freedom to work at all and are instead completely controlled by the people in their environment, that is a state of nature, or it is a system where the state is prescriptive and has to force people by lottery or by rota into doing jobs which they detest for absolutely no reward and no reason for them. We think those are not the pathways to happiness, and that is not the pathway to a good society. That's what I'm going to look at later in my speech in much more detail. Before that, I have a couple of points of rebuttal, right? Okay. We've heard from these guys that everything that we want is entirely dictated by the patriarchy, and so therefore, if we get rid of money, the patriarchy will no longer have any power structure or any ability to control people whatsoever. Right. While it's fun to yell patriarchy in a debate, that is just patently false. Why? Because prestige still exists no matter what system you have. The system which they're talking about, in which people have to be good and are judged by the value which they bring to society and how much goodness they have, is a system in which doctors hold the prestige jobs, in which inventors might happen to hold prestige jobs. Those are the kind of jobs which people might happen to want and people might desire in those societies. Those are the kind of people that people might desire to be. Therefore, those are the kind of people who can be prescriptive to other people about what kind of lives are good, about what kind of lives are the best lives within those societies, because those are the prestigious people. Those are the people that we look up to within that society. Because some people are always going to make themselves seem better than other people, even though they don't have money, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to do it. That doesn't mean you get rid of any prescriptive nature of the patriarchy. You might just change who those people are. No, thank you. It's problematic when the people who aren't in the patriarchy have absolutely no freedom to affect any change because they have no access to any money whatsoever. So that's particularly bad, right? No, thank you. Then we hear some people have nothing and that children are starving and that therefore that is the fault of global capitalism. recognize that's a lot closer actually to the state of nature. We don't particularly have to defend bondage where people are sold into slavery effectively. No thank you. Because that is not true capitalism where people are actually making decisions to enter into contracts. No thank you. So that, in the sense of that, that's a situation which will have to be strong in order to survive in those situations. What you're actually going to get under a state of nature proposition, if that was what they wanted to propose, is that you would then have a situation where most countries resemble that, in that the people hold the complete power over resources, and other people have literally nothing, and therefore they starve. So that's particularly problematic. Then we have this idea that people have a drive to be good and to achieve, and then we look back in history, that you can see that there, right? This is where being an archaeologist for once comes in handy in it. Proposition. Genocides happen in the Neolithic. Why? Because people, they happen in Germany in the Neolithic, right? Ironic but true. Why? Because the move from the state of nature to an established state is an inherently selfish act that only happens once people have developed farming, which is a system whereby some people work on the farms, other people don't, right? That is an inherently selfish act that those people are doing. Why? Because people are self-interested. Yes, sometimes that self-interest extends to those that they love and those that they see as being the same as them, but that doesn't happen under your proposition even. Why? Because some people still have the prestige jobs and therefore are valued higher than others, so people aren't all equal and lovey-dovey, as has happened in pretty much every communist and socialist state that we ever happen to look at, right? There's a reason for that, and because people's inherent selfishness comes to the core, it comes to the fore. Let's look at happiness in capitalism, right? Ladies and gentlemen, in order for societies to operate, some things simply have to be done. That involves production of food, that involves cleaning up refuse, all of those jobs that people just really don't want to do. However, what happens when you move outside of a capitalist system? Either you have a situation where that isn't done by anyone. That situation is worse for the vast majority of people. Why? Well, because there is rubbish on the streets, or because they aren't able to get any access to food, because some people have claimed that, or some people are the really good hunters and therefore kill people who try and enter into their hunting ground. No, thank you. Or the state asks people, or essentially forces people to do this. They do that either by rota or by lottery. Both of those things are bad. Why? Because this is the kind of work which people detest actually doing, which people don't volunteer to do, right? Which is the stuff which they tell us, right? However, it's also the stuff which necessarily needs to be done. So how do we strike a balance between those two things which clash? Well, we make it meaningful for those individuals when they are doing it. And that, in some sense, makes up for the fact that those are the people that are going to have to do it. It is unfortunate, of course, that people have to do those jobs. But in order for all of us to be better, those jobs have to be done, right? So the ability to earn money in that situation, I'll take Harish in 1 second, means those jobs have meaning, those jobs are rewarding, because people can better themselves, better their family, and better their situation. Please.
So you may create inequality because people want prestige jobs, i.e. jobs which help other people. On the comparative, isn't that better than people doing that and gaining status than necessarily making a large amount of money and pauperizing others?
Well, Christine tells you why oftentimes in capitalism, when people are working for their own good, they produce things which are actually better for society than people ever would otherwise. So that's really why that doesn't happen. But also what we think happens under their idea of perfect socialism is that it is essentially prescriptive. Because people are forced into those sorts of roles, in those sorts of ways, in a way which gives them absolutely no meaning. That's particularly harmful. The other thing about prestige jobs is that those jobs are limited, and the time at which you can do them is limited. So only the very best people actually get to become doctors. Only the ones who can use our resources the most and in the best way actually get those jobs. What's the great thing about capitalism? Well, jobs that are meaningful are literally endless. Because any way that you can create capital, any way you can add to the economy, means that that job is available for those individuals. So every individual has the path to meaningful lives, and meaningful lives are what give us happiness. The idea that we can actually better the lives of our family, or better the lives of ourselves, right? That doesn't happen when the only jobs that can actually better our society are those prestige jobs, because they're the jobs which benefit everyone across the board, whereas those jobs which other people have to do are just the jobs which have to get done in order for everyone to survive. And they're not jobs in which you can be meaningful to your family. They're not jobs in which you can move people forward or move yourself forward. You can't dream of a future for your family that is any different to your own if you don't happen to have the brains in that family which is going to eventually lead you to those prestige jobs. So I move to oppose.
For his comments, and now to open the second half of the debate, I'd like to call on Mr. James Hardy.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if we've achieved one thing today, it's making an Irish university chart the name of the University of Sir Oliver Cromwell. Thank you. I have two arguments. Firstly, I'm going to talk about constructive notions of value. No, actually, that's second. Just can't do numbers either. Secondly, I'm going to talk about constructive notions of value. But first, the inconsistency of capitalism and democracy, which we say will persist even without a capitalistic state, but cannot persist under a system of capitalism. Firstly, several responses to opening opposition. Firstly, they talk about incentives to do jobs. As Harish informs you in a point of information, mechanisation is not only quite good, it's also getting much better. We accept that we still need people to do some jobs, but note that the necessity for people to work is always going to be decreasing. There are plenty of goods around the world. We are living in absolute luxury while 1 billion people starve every year. We can feed these people, we have the stuff to do it. We don't need to be doing nearly as much work as we are now, lining our own pockets, making this room warm. We can do it with fewer people working. Less work, we will get less work, but we will get fewer people starving. We do think the work is likely. There will be still attached prestige to jobs, and I'll get to that more in my rebuttal later. We do think that people are motivated by more than money. Note several extremely notable debaters who, despite being incredibly intelligent people and fantastic people who could earn tons of money, go and work as teachers for very low salaries. We applaud that, but we think what they're attracted to is the prestige of that job. What they are attracted to is not the money of that job. People do value that prestige. We value that too. Secondly, on this idea of the state of nature that's magically going to come back. Ridiculous argument. Reason. State of nature existed because norms surrounding the way we view other people had not yet been established. People had highly individualistic notions of individual worth. What we say now is that norms of empathy have been heavily socially constructed. I accept that every single person in this room has value. That is not true when their vague state of nature existed. And this deals also with Marx's Neolithic Germany genocide. They had different opinions about what other people valued. When we go back to a non-capitalistic state, we think those norms are going to persist. I see no reason why they should suddenly fall apart. They are going to carry on. And we say that it is those norms that we value. No, thank you. Furthermore, and there will be self-interest in this as well, because we do think that people respond in a social way to the fact that we're empathetic. That there is a social pressure on me to value other people, because if I don't value other people, I'm less likely for other people to view me as valuable and to eventually sleep with me, hopefully, at some point. Sorry. That's one joke, right? Next, we think that democracy is likely to persist. Why is that? Democracy is a social arrangement that we've come to. It's a way in which we access our freedom. It's a way in which we maximise our freedom and have an impact upon other ideas. We do think that a socialist democracy can persist. We think that this is an optimal structure. And we know that we think it's an optimal structure because it is a structure that we have put significant work into developing, that we have put significant work into exporting. It's a structure we value globally, or certainly globally within the capitalist world, and we think it's a structure that is likely to persist. No, thank you. Next, they tell us about sort of constructive notions of value, which sort of links to my first point. But they sort of give us a comparison about who defines what prestige means. They tell us it's doctors and teachers. Now, even on that comparison, I think this is probably good, because prestige in this case is likely to track helping people. We think there's going to be a dynamic idea of prestige. People are going to look at what they can do to help people the most. And notably, this leads to competition within these areas. People say, no, I want to be more regarded as more valuable. I'm going to compete for more prestige. I'm going to try and do a more valuable job. That may be refuse cleaning. If people see refuse cleaning as the ultimate good within society, we think that is extremely valuable. And we think that's something other people will value. Notice that Christine thinks it's disgusting. Mark agrees that it's disgusting. They probably do. They are brought up in a capitalistic society that tells them that it's a low wage and that it's completely unfalsifiable, by the way. That there's a low wage attached to it and that it's disgusting. But we say that we can deconstruct this idea. We can show there is significant prestige attached to this. Harish points this out to you in a point of information. Their response is simplistic when they say that we have produced these things through the current incentive structure. True, but our incentive structure is better. We track prestige, we track how much you help people directly, not through the amount of money it maximises. If there is going to be competition for prestige, I'd rather that was defined by the doctors and teachers Mark talks about than the bankers who sell derivatives in food that make people across the world starve. I think that is a better definition of what is valuable.
Semi-finalist, Euros finalists, Euro CAs, and us, winners of the Dundee IV, ladies and gentlemen. We're very, very proud indeed. Okay, so I want to just talk about 3 things, I think, today. I want to tell you that while capitalism isn't perfect, we think it gets better, ladies and gentlemen. We think that currently we've had a lot of stuff from these guys that say, look at all of the problems we have. Look at all the problems the system we have has caused everywhere. And I want to argue that actually there have been some huge benefits that capitalism has driven around the world for everyone. And we think actually if we only stick with it for longer, if we only give it the chance it needs, we can continue and get things that people really believe and really want. And so that's why we think we should continue with the system we have. The second thing I want to talk about is people. And they said people should be able to choose a new system. We're going to argue that actually, given the principles they've outlined, we don't think you can realistically create a new system given what they've said, given what they've asked us to believe is true. The final thing I want to argue is why excess is important, and why capitalism breeds excess, and why we think that leads to all the things that are good about capitalism, all the things that we really cherish and value. Okay, so first of all, on a base level, when we strip away all the constructs of materialism that first claim that we all are under, what do we all really want? What is it that we all really need and we all look for in our lives and throughout the world? Everyone, what I believe everyone is looking for is to be fed, is to be healthy, and is to be able to be happy. And so really we have to look at whether capitalism is able to give what we think, these basic things that we think are true, to everyone. Can it do this? And is there this other system that can do it better? That's what we really think this debate should be about. So first of all, I think we're just looking at those things. First ones have asked us to believe that those are constructs. I don't believe those are constructs. I just believe that those are things that we all inherently want. We all inherently believe that everyone else that lives on this earth should have. Now, can the system we have give those people, everyone on this earth, the things that we think, or the things that I believe anyway, we all really want and all really need? We think, importantly, they've already talked about the problems, but let's look at how capitalism has actually enhanced the goals that I've outlined. We think that first prop and second prop point to the problems. They say, look at all the poor people, look at all of the starving people in the world, why aren't we helping them? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is that we are helping them. The poverty that exists today is nothing to the poverty that existed 10 years ago, to the poverty that existed 50 years ago, to the poverty that existed 100 years ago. The fallacy, the problem they don't want you to see is that capitalism is working. We are feeding people, we are making people more healthy, and as a consequence people are becoming happier. Like, we the human race, have eradicated smallpox, and we're like 5 years away from eradicating polio. Like, children in Africa, that you might not believe it from the news, are like 5 times less likely to die from starvation under the system we have now, under the place we're living now, than they were 100 or 50 years ago. So the problems they say, it's very easy to point to the problems now, but the important thing to remember is to compare those problems that they tell you exist to the problems that existed in history. And look how far we've come, ladies and gentlemen. We just disagree, we just think that if you continue to use a system that we've proved can work, we can give the things that we think everyone wants, and we think you can do that really effectively.
Let's say that you're right, and capitalism has, over hundreds of years, helped a few people. Wouldn't it be better to now introduce a system which can help millions more much faster?
Okay. First of all, we would contend that we haven't had a realistic explanation of what any sort of system they would want to introduce would do. Like, we just don't necessarily think that, like, everyone working for the same wage, or everyone, like, having an equal share in the state or land
would necessarily bring about like the feeding and the health of everyone. We think that the real reason capitalism is successful is that people are allowed to get an excess, that people are allowed to gain more than their fair share, for people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have billions of pounds. But you only have to look at these people and just see what they're doing with the money that they earn. Like both of these men have pledged to give over 90% of their wealth to the people who have the least in our society. And this is interesting because First Prop wanted you to believe that like we're all really, really good, and like some people are really good. And the point about this capitalism is that we have to believe in people. We have to believe in the people that can make it to the top, who can get the real amount of money, that can get lots of money. You have to believe in them. You have to believe that they will give that money. You have to believe, guys. As human beings, with humanity, will give some of that wealth away. We think ultimately that, like, although there might be some incredibly greedy people out there who, like, try and amass billions and billions of pounds of wealth, there are some excellent people out there, really great, really great. Some of them are here, actually. Some of them are here, but some of them are really wealthy, and these people have the power to give health and food and happiness to thousands and millions and billions of people in the world. And we think, while it might sound slightly cliche and slightly, I myself feeling a little bit nauseous right now, we think that ultimately it can succeed and it should succeed. And we think that if you try and destroy a system, you are only going to end up harming the people you're trying to save, harming the poor. We can't see a system by where you suddenly change everything. Like they try to make you believe that like just because you can change a system means that you'll be able to help the poor people. They never said like how that was possible. We think that yeah, it's not perfect, but you know, we might as well just go with it.
Thus far, it is almost undoubtedly the case that there will be children born across the world, many of whom will be deprived of food, of chances, of resources, of education, not through any fault of their own, often not through any fault of their parents, but simply because where they were born. While there'll be people in other parts of the world, and indeed many in this room, who are incredibly lucky, because the social environment where we were born, because the fact that our skills were valued in the society we were in, because the infrastructure which exists in the societies we were in, because even when we put effort in, because to a large degree that is because the luck and the genetics we have had, we are able to get those resources denied to many others. That is the problem with global capitalism, and that is what we want to end. I want to talk about two things in this speech. First, I want to look at the harm which global capitalism has done to the disenfranchised across the world. And secondly, I want to look at how capitalism prevents real choice by preventing the democratic structures which allow us to make choices. Firstly, let's talk about the harms to the disenfranchised across the world. It was interesting from the opposition that they could never conceptualize of a world without capitalism beyond that of anarchy or maybe that of communism. We don't think it was very realistic, or what many people would choose, the metric set up by opening government. We think what people would choose would probably be a social arrangement where you did, for instance, have a state. But that was probably a democratic state, one which distributed huge goods to all individuals, where individuals still did work, but they didn't work for money. They worked in areas where they wanted to work. I mean, that's the choices which individuals would take. That's the kind of socialist democracy we believe individuals would choose. Now, opening opposition want to say that the problem with that world is you don't get the goods which people want. You don't get the stuff which makes individuals happy. In the first place, I am willing to concede in a non-capitalist world, it might well be the case a lot less stuff is produced. What I will say is the essentials needed will be produced. Why? Firstly, mechanization of the means of production increasingly means that for low intensity and low effort, you get lots of the basics needed by humanity to be produced. That will still take some effort from people, but that is effort I think individuals are willing to put in. Firstly, opening opposition explained this to us by saying people will still do jobs for prestige. We know that right now, even with subjectivity many of us have, we are still willing to take low-paid jobs because we believe in social good. I am much happier that even if you have inequality, with some people having more prestige than others, the way that you gain that isn't by trying to make money, but is instead trying to help individuals, is instead by being the doctor. We think when the currency of reward is how many people you help, that is a much better world where far more people are going to be helped than the world which we currently live in. We think it is grossly immoral right now where the profit incentive doesn't mean that we produce food or drugs for people in the rest of the world, but instead a world where we have Xboxes and luxury goods. We think we'd better if we didn't have those, and instead we have a world where we have people who went out of the way to help individuals. We hear from all of the opposition bench that would be a great that one of the major problems is people aren't necessarily good, that people necessarily help others. But what James tells you very clearly is you have growth in empathy. What has happened now, which wasn't true thousands of years ago in the Neolithic age, is we all have a moral sense that there are other individuals who matter. All we want to do is make people more and more aware that there are huge numbers of others, not just in these rooms, not just in our country, but all across the world. Second opposition want to explain another way of helping these individuals. They think capitalism is a way of helping people. They point out that poverty has decreased over time. I want to ask firstly, do they seriously believe that Chinese worker who works in Foxconn for 36 hours in a row and gets about 20p a minute, 20p an hour is actually happy? I think many of those people aren't. I think many of those people are as oppressed as they ever were. I am unclear why it's the case that the person who was once a rural worker and now feels a desperate need to go to the city because the false promise that they might do well, which opening opposition celebrate, but to the vast majority something which we will never ever be able to achieve, is something which we should reward. And even to the extent capitalism has helped individuals, I don't know why it's the case it will help more individuals, other than the fact that this helps some. I am more than happy to say that this system, which has persecuted large groups, should be broken down. Instead, that you can have one of these global states which actually benefits to vast groups of individuals. I am more than happy with that system instead. I am more than happy with that system now because I am not willing to trust capitalism to overcome all the problems that it itself has created. No thanks. Let's suddenly talk about individual choice and a capitalist democracy. Because we agree with opening government, where they tell you that individuals can only value, the only reason why goods are valuable or social arrangements are valuable is to the degree that individuals choose it. The problem with the world we live in is individuals never are able to make that choice. The choices which we believe we make, or we make through our democratic systems, are instead made because of global capital. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Christine.
You tell us we have some machines, and so people will learn to be so empathetic that they generate enough food for the entire world from those machines. Yet under the status quo, even with the empathy James wants to harp on about, people walk past homeless people on their own streets. When will all of that go away, your brave people?
Because to a large degree, these problems no longer exist to the degree you want to talk about. Yes, it is true that empathy is not absolute. It is still the case that people vote for a welfare system which helps many people in these countries overcome the worst crises. It is the case people still are more than happy to give foreign aid. Empathy is not complete, but it still exists, and we think that is still beneficial and exists to a degree it never has before. Let's talk a little bit more about the social arrangements which are in place. If you want in a particular country, wanted to raise tax to provide those cancer drugs to people in your country, or to increase tax to provide foreign aid to individuals in other countries, you would be unable to do so. Why? Because global capital would risk moving away from your economy and shattering the entire basis in which you live. The choice, the sovereignty, and the democratic decisions we make can no longer be made without reference to those to global capital, which will decide the decisions we make. It is why we can't raise taxes when we as a society want to and help people. It's why, for instance, even in the United Kingdom, when people don't, for instance, want to cut They aren't able to say that to a government. The government can always say, if you don't, this will harm many individuals because global capital will move out and the economy will suffer. That's the empathetic individuals who want good services aren't able to provide it because global capitalism denies them democracy. At the end, capitalism has harmed people, and the end of capitalism can help those who are unfortunate through no choice of their own. And you can have real democracy, real freedom, and real choices. I'm very happy to propose.
Now call on Miss Marlena Varles to close the case for the opposition and for the Trinity IV final as a whole.
Well, people say that when you speak in a large chamber, you're supposed to imagine everyone in their underwear, so none of you are safe. Thanks, Derwin. False. And we wonder if that consciousness is going to become a lot more of a stark reality at the point when the dairy farmers stop producing because they want to, like Muireann, create, and the milk queue is still sitting there, and people are there and they're hungry. Ladies and gentlemen, we think this is a debate about two things. We think it's a debate about the nature of human beings and what they're happy to do and what they will do and what benefits them under the system. And number two, we think it's a debate about what the overall successes of capitalism versus the overall failures of capitalism and the importance of not stagnating in general the global economy. But what we're going to say is the first thing that we think is massively important is to say that yes, we think that people are not intrinsically good. We think that people are intrinsically self-interested, and sometimes that self-interest leads us to be good. But that is a separate distinction. No, thank you, Muireann. What we say is that self-interest is what makes you work in the first place. It's what makes you go and do things. And if you choose to give money to a homeless person, or if you choose to something like that, we think that people don't do that despite the fact that we have an excess of wealth. No, thank you. It is not because of the fact, no, thank you. It's not because of the fact that they don't have the money in their pockets. It's not the fact that they're trying to accumulate this wealth for themselves. It's because of the fact that, frankly, they don't care. We don't think that this is going to get particularly better in the situation that we take away any kind of meaningful motive for people to try to get better, try to do other things, except for their own self-interest. Because in the state of nature, they're the only ones who they need to make it work for. At the point where you effectively take out the state, which is an opening half, at the point where you take out the state, we think that individuals are going to be most concerned about themselves and their kin. What we say is that's massively problematic for the sole reason that the entire proposition hinges upon this notion of empathy, which was assumed. We don't think that people have that empathy. We think that that's why right now, as there has always been, that people are selfish. It doesn't make sense that in the current system, the nature of human beings be entirely altered, and something so fundamental to our core would be able to be changed as simple as an economic system. No, thank you. What we say is that these people are presumably going to still exist in their system. But then, what's going to happen if it fails? Well, Muireann tells us we're going to have constant revolution. Constantly, if the system fails, we'll change it. We think that's probably a great idea, for their model, because it probably will fail, as far as any example has constant revolution. It's really funny because, Ruth's second point was feminism. And, yeah, we got constant revolution, but do you know who generally fights is men? But who's going to reap the rewards of this are the women that are at home who are also oppressed by capitalism. No, thank you. We don't think it makes any particular sense. It was never clearly explained why it is the case necessarily that women are going to succeed within this model, especially in the case where the only way that you're able to overthrow is presumably through violent revolution. I think that any mechanism where that is the sole way you can get out of the system, it's probably a bad idea because you're hinging on people's empathy. And if that fails, then you're hinging on people's ability to wield a gun. Harish.
Okay. It is true that most people are self-interested, but most people are also empathetic. It's not an either-or. You can be self-interested to some degree, but also empathetic and wanting to help many others to a different degree.
Yeah, that's fair. What we think, though, is that concerning self-interest, we think that more people are comparatively self-interested within their own kin. So when they choose to help people, it's because they choose to help people that they're close to, people that they care about. It's why we don't think that you're going to be helping people in faraway lands. That's why we think that global capitalism does better, because you're effectively going to like stagnate like the developing world like, within your model, because we think that people will still presumably have to live somewhere. And if global capitalism like goes into a downfall, we're all out creating and working in our own little villages in like, I don't know, Edinburgh. We're probably going to stay there as opposed to going into the developing world, even in this global capitalist system, because we're self-interested in the people who are close to us as those people who are far from us. No, thank you. We think that choice is entirely important. The reason that choice is important is because of the fact that when people can meaningfully choose to do something, they're able to meaningfully exist and do something with their lives. But what they don't give you on side proposition is the fact that like we oftentimes have to make choices which are absolutely shit. No, thank you. We recognize on side opposition that the person who has to plow the fields isn't doing so because they have a meaningful existence. We recognize that people are exploited under capitalism, but what we say is it gives them the hope of getting out, as opposed to a system where like the state determines what your occupation is, the state determines how much you make. If your self-interest is to make money or to accumulate wealth, to have more things, a communist system can never ever go for that. And that's problematic. No, thank you. Number two, concerning the overall success of capitalism, we think it's the best, worst system. What we say, ladies and gentlemen, is obviously it isn't perfect. We're happy to admit that. But the fact that like over however many years of human history, side proposition failed to come up with one significant example of where something like this has probably worked. The only exception of Scandinavian countries like Sweden where they pay taxes, we think it's problematic because with Swedish the companies are taxed. We think that companies like IKEA and H&M, two companies which mostly exploit labor in the third world, we think that in those situations it's highly problematic to say that just because they're social democracies, they could never be capitalist. No, we think that that's probably a very good method to go off of. We think that that's probably capitalism at its best. People can make decisions like that. But the problem is that's not removing choice entirely. What we think is that under the system we have, we create things because we want to make money. That's what David brings you in his extension. He brings you the fact that when we create things to make money, really good things happen. Because if people do want to do things like cure polio, they want to get these research grants. And so they work harder, and then polio is cured. But the thing is, it's not just that one person who benefits from the cure of a major disease, but that one person effectively saves thousands and hundreds of thousands of people over the developing world. What we think is that all the mechanization that Paris triumphs would only happen under a capitalist system. And the reason why the entirety of proposition can exist is because of the fact that it's capitalism to fall back on when it fails. Because of the fact that we're going to need more machines. Because the people in the third world are still going to be there tomorrow, and they're still going to be there the day after. But the difference is, on side opposition, we give you a meaningful way that we can make sure that their situation gets marginally better, at the very least. We think that the steady improvements which we have made will only be seen under a capitalist structure because of the fact that at the point where individuals have to do things like work, at the point where they do things such as create vaccines, or even create prosthetic limbs for people who've had their legs blown off in landmines, these are the decisions may be made in self-interest. They may be made because they want to make heaps of money, but the benefits which they accrue are for everyone in the world. We don't think that capitalism is single-minded. We think that capitalism is just a really good idea we impose.
I would like to thank all speakers for what was a fantastic debate. So we're going to have one more round of applause for everybody.